Welcome back to the Hippie Moms podcast, my friends. I'm so excited. Today we have Kristy LaMariana with us.
Hi there. I'm happy to be here.
So thrilled you're here, Kristy. I'm really excited about this conversation. One, because you and I got together. It was a very spontaneous meeting, and it was like two souls recognized each other. It was so beautiful, like a sister from another lifetime. And there was so much inspiration and awakening that happened within me in the conversation that I'm really so grateful to have you on the podcast, because I really do feel you're going to speak to so many hearts today. So thanks for being with us. And I'd love to just start out, like, tell us about yourself and who you are, and maybe a story or two or whatever that brought you to where you are today.
Sure. I guess since we're going to kind of specifically focus on the things that really blew our hearts open together, which were death, dying, loss, and grief, I guess I'll focus on that and how that journey kind of became a part of my life. So I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I went to school in Virginia Beach and Norfolk and got my undergrad in sociology, and then with minors in psych and art, and then found myself in graduate school for a degree in art psychotherapy. And when I graduated, I moved out here from the East Coast, and I got a job at a hospice. And I guess I should back up and say my ex-husband's mother died when she was 47, and I got to witness hospice coming in to take care of her. And when they came in, I thought, wow, those people are like a band of angels. And my mother had said to me before that even happened, I could see you doing hospice. And I really didn't have any experience or even really know what it was. But I guess I just had this sort of comfort level. I was in my 20s, or a knack for being there for people when they were dying and being there for their loved ones. So we came out here on our honeymoon. We both got jobs, and then went back east, packed up, came here a month later, and didn't have our jobs because the hospice that had hired me said, well, we only had 14 patients and all of them died. And I was a privately owned hospice. And I was like, well, isn't that what happens in hospice? But they were new and young, and they didn't have the budget. And then my ex had gotten a job at a motorcycle dealership, and the person who had hired him was fired within that month. So we came here and didn't have jobs. Ultimately, we ended up with our own motorcycle dealership and our own nonprofit hospice. So it all kind of came full circle, but that was an interesting way to sort of start our lives in New Mexico. So anyway, I ultimately did get a job at that hospice. I squeaked like a squeaky wheel for a year until they finally hired me, and I worked there for a year and had some really profound experiences holding space for people to die, being there for their loved ones, and officiating memorial services, and just really kind of diving into that part of myself, which I didn't really know existed, until I was offered the opportunity to be in that space. And so I started as a bereavement counselor and an art therapist, and I heard the chaplain telling the social worker that he was going to retire. He was like 74. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm a non-denominational interfaith minister through my Reiki studies because I'm a Reiki Master. And I thought, I'm going to go to the hospice administrator and tell her, I'm 26 years old. I'll do Bob's job and my job and not ask for extra money, but get to have that on my resume and have that experience. So she accepted. And that was the beginning of a really neat journey. And that was kind of how I got involved in hospice. And then at that time, I started reading every book there was about life after life and near-death experiences. And I read all of Raymond Moody's books. And I call him like the female Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And she is the one who coined the 5 stages of grief. And that's like in most psych textbooks and everything. And then Raymond is the one who coined the term the near-death experience. So he studied people who died and came back, and he has a few PhDs in like Greek mysticism and mythology and psychology. And I was lucky enough to study with him. He came out to New Mexico and taught me how to guide people through an experience that he brought to the Western world after he studied the way ancient cultures grieved. And he discovered this thing called a psychomantium, which is like an apparition chamber or an oracle of the dead. I call it a reflections room. And he came out and spent several days at my home up in the East Mountains, and we did that work together. And then I went on to do that work with some people. And now in my home here, I've actually created a psychomantium, and the experiences that people are having are really special. It really helps with resolving complicated grief. That was kind of the intended purpose for it. In ancient Greece, they would carve these tunnels deep into the earth, and the bereaved would go and crawl over the smoke of hash to alter their consciousness and end up in a space where there was a cauldron of wine that they could stare into. And 9 times out of 10, they would either have like a visual, auditory, or kinesthetic experience of their beloved. There would be just a dim candle behind them in this space. And so Raymond created a space like this at his home in Anniston, Alabama. And I finally did it here. So that's something that I'm really excited to bring to the community and offer people my goal is to kind of offer people a new paradigm and new agreements around death, dying, loss, and grief, so that we can actually change the way we experience dying and grieving. And a few things I like to say are, when I meet somebody, are, what do you believe? Because what we believe really does determine how we grieve. And so that's for the bereaved people. And the other thing is that when you really look at the way people die, it really oftentimes is the way they live. So this is an interesting story. My family member friend's son died 2 Fridays ago. He was 20 years old, and he lived a wild life, like reckless, if you will, driving very fast, and that's how he died, was driving really fast, living on the edge. A lot of people live a life of depression and suffering, and you'll see these long, drawn out deaths. I think what really matters is, what do we take away from it? At the end of the day, there were the 5 stages of grief that Kubler-Ross created. And then there's a new guy that's kind of hot on the grief scene named David Kessler. And he created what he calls the 6th stage of grief, which is what you really do with people when you're counseling them through grief, is to find meaning, to find the lessons, to find, to make it so, in my words, they don't die in vain. And so last week, one of my son's dear friends was shot and killed here. And he and his friends have had a very hard time making sense of it all, that it was just a tragedy. And I know someone else whose little sister burned in a fire, and they think these things are just tragedies. But when we step away from the tragedy and we look at the gift, the inherent gift that is present through death, you think about it, and dying can bring people together. Dying makes people realize, I should have said I love you. I should have held him longer. I should have told him what his friendship meant to me. I should have, could have, would have, if only if. So I feel like dying wakes people up to the reality that we really have a choice to live each day as if it were our last. And most of us don't do that. Most of us take each other for granted, don't even see you later, like just expecting that we're going to be there. And I've really taught this to my kids. I have 4 sons, and I feel like I've really explained this to them. And my youngest, I think, embraces it the most. I'm not sure if it's kind of like a fear, but every time he says goodnight, every time he says goodbye in the morning for school, it's bye, love you, see you later. It's always see you later, see you in the morning, just reaffirming, I'm going to see you again, because he really does cherish this life. And I think we just take our breathing for granted. And I like to say we're like one breath away from death. That's it. All it is one breath, and we leave this body and go on to a new reality. And I also think, did I already say this? I really do think what we believe determines how we grieve. And the people who have a very solid belief system, no matter what their path is, if they can get to that truth that we are eternal beings, or I can't remember the name of that. Was it a French philosopher, whoever said, consider for a moment that we are not human beings who have the occasional spiritual experience, but rather we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I think when we live that way, we really do cherish these moments of being human and having this experience of being a human being. So
wow. Now, it's so beautiful. So much there. Is it really just our culture? Do you know this, that just kind of puts death, the thought of it behind the curtains and doesn't look at it? That's how I feel. It's like, if you think about death or you talk about death, it's like, it's going to be right around the corner. But what I've found just recently, as I've really dove into my mortality and the truth that my breaths, my days are limited, there is a freedom there. There is a sense of, like you said, we just take everything for granted because we think we have another day. So when we don't live authentically, we don't live fully because we're just kind of almost all numbed out and distracted. And is this specifically, our culture? Or is it, because I know in the East, they definitely look at and celebrate death
A little
like we do.
differently. I think in different cultures, historically, they've looked at it as a celebration or a graduation onto something better, and there are big celebrations. I think the way that we can kind of bring some of that in, we people have been doing more celebration of life than funerals, if you will. I just went to one up in Santa Fe that was quite beautiful, where my friend's mother and stepfather died within months of each other, and so that celebration, it was more of a celebration than a time for mourning. And so I think it's a shift in consciousness that we in the Western world could make. But if we think about it, even in medical school, doctors aren't really taught how to cope with death because it's seen as a failure. Their job is to keep people alive no matter what. And so I think until we can kind of change the paradigm around this whole thing and not think that it's such a tragedy, because no matter how we go, it's just a way to go. But that becomes the story, and there's so much shame around different ways of people, happen to go by suicide. We've given that such a terrible meaning when maybe that is the greatest gift for that soul. If there was so much suffering, how is that any different than getting a terrible cancer that slowly eats somebody alive? Or really, Raymond Mood, actually, when Robin Williams passed with suicide, he spoke about, it was a 20-minute thing and you had to pay and it's no longer available. But he talked about how we give the meaning to the death. We give meaning to death in this country, basically on a whole, as it being just this most terrible, tragic thing. I think that's because we truly believe in separation. And, the Course in Miracles says that's an illusion. There's no separation between us and each other and God, or the pen, the paper, my cell phone, my shoes. We're all atoms of emotion. We're all molecules of emotion. And we're all living cells and beings. And I was having this conversation with my youngest son the other day about what happens when we die and how will we recognize each other? Because, really, is it possible that we're going to come together like this and recognize each other like this? Or are we going to recognize each other from our energy beings, from our heart energy, from that like love that goes on forever and ever? And he's going to be a physicist. So it's really neat for us, it's like spirit and science meeting when we talk about these things. And there really is a bridge between science and spirit. And I think we're going to see more of that. The more that we study, the more that the physicists study. And I think they're starting to make some groundbreaking realizations in that field. But you had said something earlier that triggered a thought in my head. When I first started doing the hospice, my best friend had said to me, I think a really important question to ask people when they're dying is, did you become you? And you had said earlier about authenticity, that thinking about this makes us live more authentically. And the sad part was that there were an equal amount of people that did not become themselves, that said, I got married and became a doctor because that's what was expected of me. I did this because that's what my family had hoped for. I did that because none of it was really just following their own intuition and what would make them feel joy and purpose in this life. And there were people that did become themselves and kind of went their own way. But I think at the end of the day, these are, instead of waiting until the last minute and having regret, it's like, let's just encourage ourselves and our kids right now to become you. What are you passionate about? What makes you tick? What makes you feel like you're helping other people and making a difference in this world? And so those are some really important questions, for people to ask themselves, and to lay your head on the pillow every night and say, did I live today as if it could be my last? And if I fell short, how can I let the people that I let down today know that? How can I forgive myself and trust that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it's going to be a new day and I'm going to get a chance to be a better version of myself, as if I was going to not live past tomorrow, or that my loved one wasn't going to be here. And it really does make us, I remember like in high school, I was explaining this to my teenage son whose friend got shot and killed last week. I remember in high school, the first time I lost a friend, and what it did to our whole friend group, how it brought us all together. Like we really knew the fragility of life. It didn't last. It didn't
Right.
last long. We
Right.
all went back to our wild ways and, living recklessly and wild and speeding and doing all the stupid things that we did, because I don't think that it really was like a lasting impact. And that's the problem you see. And so many people it's like we keep repeating the lessons over and over and over again.
Yeah, we really do forget. I mean, it is so apparent when we lose someone or something tragic or big happens in our lives. We really do understand the fragility and the sacredness and the preciousness of life. And then we forget and we go back into the forgetting and we stay distracted and in this materialism of doing more, be more, accumulate more. And it's pointless. I mean, it really is so meaningless. And so how do we as and that's one thing as a mother, I think that's when I first had my child, my firstborn, I remember sitting in the hospital the first couple days. I had a C-section, so I was there for a long time and I would just wake up in the middle of the night when the baby was crying and my husband was sleeping in the chair over there and I would just be overcome with fear, like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen if I lose this child? What if he gets kidnapped? What if all this starts to come up? And it's just like, oh my gosh, like we hold all of this, like it's so sacred in this moment. I know he's going to be 21 before I know it. Now he's 13. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it goes so quickly. And it is so precious and so fleeting. And as a mom, all I want in my heart of hearts is to be present and to be with my children and to be me, authentically, truth, genuine, to show them the way. Because, for years, Kristy, I spent so much time on my phone and social media numbing from pain of motherhood and feeling not enough and like I need to be more. And I just and there was just this disconnect within me and it was gnawing at me. And through time, through healing, through meditation and really getting into the core, now it's like I feel more myself and than ever. And now I'm really being called to, I want to live every moment, every one of my precious moments present and engaged and kind and loving. And I love what you said. Like, are we going to bed at night and are we going to bed with regret? Are we going to bed in front of our phone and just distracted out of our minds and waking up to news and like we're not even living anymore? And that's where I really feel, you sent me this book and told me about this book. It's called I'm going to put it in the show notes, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
Yes.
And the Tibetan Book of Dying, right? I think is a really big book. It's known, but this one I haven't read that one. But I cannot tell you like what perfect timing that was for me because it really helped me come to terms with my own mortality. And although for most people, they're scared of talking about it. Even when I talked to some people recently, they're just like, they kind of close up. They're like, don't be morbid. And it's like, but this is the reality. And this understanding, this knowledge can actually create a more intentional and present life for us rather than just like, oh, it's behind the curtains. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see it. It's over there.
Yeah.
It's like, it's always there. And we have to like take the curtains back and look it in the eye. And that's
Yeah.
scary for a lot of us.
I remember working hospice. It was interesting because they use the word crisis a lot. And I would think to myself, well, what crisis could there possibly be when we know that ultimately everyone's going to pass? And they would say to me, we need you to go over and visit, Rosa Chavez, but don't say the D word. And I would say, what do you want me to talk about with her? The weather? Like what I'm going there to help her, to escort her, to hold her hand so that she can look her fears in the face. She can work through the forgivenesses that she needs to work through with her family members. But do you know how few people actually wanted what I was offering? When I would say, let's sit down and do the final healing work, for people that are lucky enough to have their minds intact while they're dying and just have their bodies, fading, you could do some really amazing karmic familial healing, generational healing. There were maybe like 3 families that really embraced what could be done with end of life. And then the people, most people just wanted the sort of, I don't know, niceties, just kind of just keep it superficial. But then what happens is then the person dies and there's all this complicated grief. Why didn't I take that opportunity to, my dad passed of Alzheimer's, and I'll tell you, while it was a really terrible death in a lot of ways, it was a really beautiful death in a lot of ways, because how many times do I fly home to Virginia every few months, right? Never, because I have kids. My sister and I went home regularly that last couple years. And to be able to snuggle up next to your 85-year-old father as a grown woman in her 50s, you just don't see that. That's what that path of dying afforded our family, was an opportunity to have intimacy and tenderness and forgiveness and just quiet, sacred time together, just holding hands, saying nothing, looking into each other's eyes. It was, to me, the most beautiful death it could have been. It was really, really quite beautiful, and such an honor to be there. When he took his last inhale, he didn't even exhale. Most people have a very long, and he just, I don't even know if you could hear that because I have noise cancellation, but I made like a long exhale. Yeah. He had just a nice inhale. And the day I had gotten there, which was a Saturday evening, he passed Tuesday, I put a rose quartz heart in the pocket of his gown over his heart. And I feel like that exhale was unheard because it went right into that heart, and I carry it with me in my purse everywhere I go.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that special? So cool. The thing that's interesting is I feel his presence. I feel he is more accessible to me now than he was before. I feel like I can call it. It's different than a phone call. It's a presence. And when I talk about this new paradigm and new agreements, I'm not saying that we can erase grief altogether from the human experience, because we really do lose their physical presence. We lose the ability to converse like this and to touch and feel and smell. We lose the sensory experience. And when we realize that being a human, what it's all about is really being engaged in and aroused by our senses. And when we don't have our senses anymore, we have to go into the depths of what we really are, and to create a spiritual connection which lives beyond the senses. And senseful living is something that I have a team. We were working on a startup for a while, and we brought this sort of lifestyle consciousness, and that senseful living is really the deconstruction of mindfulness. We can say to each other, are we living mindfully, especially when someone's dying? Are we present? Well, how do you do that? How do you actually be mindful? If you think about it, the best way to be mindful is to really stop and smell the roses. Listen to the music, taste that strawberry, gaze into your loved one's eyes and get lost right there and don't go anywhere else. Touch them and feel that touch like you're never going to touch them again. And that's really what I think is the cornerstone of this human experience, is being engaged in our senses. And when you have that beautiful opportunity of doing that when they're alive, and then realizing once the transition is made, now I have an opportunity for a new relationship that I never thought possible. So many people think, oh my God, she sits around and talks to her, loved ones that have passed on. She's crazy. But no, I think that we're not crazy. I think that we're tapping into multiple realities that really are happening right here, right now.
Yeah.
Joe Dispenza, I heard him say something recently that really blew my mind and made a lot of sense, which was, we talk about past lives. I'm certified in Ericksonian Clinical Hypnotherapy and doing past life regressions and all that. And I've done all of it and it's great. But Joe says it's all happening right now anyway. So it's not even really a past life. It's a now life, just swirling around what seems to be the only life. But there's all these possibilities. That are going on at the same time. And when we can drop into that and just be still, maybe we can start to remember, because I think that we get so conditioned and we just forget.
I mean, I think that above all else is like the most poignant and important point, is if we don't slow down, we don't be still and present, we miss out on our whole lives. And eventually we're going to be on that deathbed. And I remember reading like the 10 things people say, like the most common things on their deathbed is, I just wish I didn't worry so much. I wish I had the courage to live my life and just appreciate and love more. And it's like, we spin and spin and spin in this illusion of things that aren't even happening, and we're missing the most precious moments. And I visit myself, when I say I visit myself on the deathbed, because I know that's a part of me that is happening here and now. And that wisdom is so amazing. Like when my kid pisses me off, or, and I feel that, it's like, I can tap into that and be like, does this really, it doesn't matter. And it's not about like, it's not about, gaslighting myself, or, pretending things aren't happening, but it's like, why are we so spun up in things and distracted when it's like our precious life is happening before our eyes and we're not even paying attention to it.
It's that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all the small stuff. Because at the end of the day, the things that upset us are really so meaningless. And half the time, I remember being married, I was with my ex for 28 and a half years. You'd have arguments and a little while later, not even know what you argued about.
Yeah. Oh my
Because
gosh.
it didn't even matter. It was just this energy that needed somewhere to go. And I guess it's just the human angst,
Yes.
just the angst of expectation, the angst of just all the demands of life, and not allowing ourselves to just slow down. Like in many cultures, they do slow down. To back up, Dia de los Muertos, they celebrate death, and they celebrate that time when the veils are the thinnest between the here and the there. And to revisit, like, does every culture, see death like a total failure, or how do they honor it and embrace it and memorialize it? And so I think Dia de los Muertos is such a beautiful celebration, and so we do here in New Mexico. I don't know if it's a big thing all over the country, but I do love that we have that here, and we have our beautiful festivals and things that go on. And one year the kids and I all dressed up and, did our faces and made the head wreaths, and it was really fun.
That is so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, I really do believe, at least in my consciousness and the way I'm experienced, that I am choosing a different agreement with death. I have conversations with my grandmother. Like, I know she's there. She's brought me messages. She sends me signs. It's so profound and beautiful. And I like you said with your dad, like it's so much closer and more intimate. I mean, even though we don't have this physical, like, I feel her guiding me. And I think that guidance, that support is there for us, but we can't tap into it when we're so full of ourselves and of our thoughts and our shoulda, woulda, couldas. Like, it really, there's so much that we're talking here. Like, death really is the understanding, the looking it in its face, gives us such a huge gift in our lives. I would love for you to just share a little bit, what are some things when you see people pass and the grieving? Because, obviously we have people that have lost people. We have people that are maybe going through losing someone, or even in a battle with themselves. Like, what are some things? I know you said near-death experience. If you don't believe of life beyond death, or you're not sure, you don't have evidence yourself, where do you start with something like that?
Wow. Well, I guess sometimes it's reading some great books that wonderful authors have penned, and that really does help us to open up. But at the end of the day, embarking upon creating this Corrales grief spot, what I've realized is I really don't want to know what everybody else is writing and their experiences are. I want to close my eyes, and I would encourage other people to do this, to really, really learn what your intuition is, and really, really remember what you think, because there's so much information outside of ourselves that I feel like, how do we authentically define and discover and define how we're going to do this dance when we're watching all these other instructors? And so for me, I'm kind of shutting it, because what I've noticed on social media is, how everything, I think it's going to be so neat when we're out of these bodies and we look down and go, look at how much industry was created, capitalizing upon people's pain, insecurity, and poor self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a part of that. I have witnessed now within the last couple of months, it is unbelievable how many people are creating. Now there's a new term. You want to be a grief coach. You want to get a certification. And so now this whole thing has become It's like we talked earlier before we started the podcast about how we unfortunately in this country have bastardized some really sacred things. Our sexuality with the porndemic,
Mhm.
hospice with just morphining people right out of here. We don't even everything sacred has been cut from budgets. I used to go into assisted livings and memory care units and do a program called Remember Now. Activities directors would hire people like me and other people to go in and play guitar and sing and do crafts and art and chair yoga. Now the activities directors have to do it all because of money, because there's not enough money to pay people to come in and offer these elderly people wonderful experiences. And we've also bastardized yoga, and we've turned it, you go to these hot yoga, it's like a pickup thing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's there. Where's the close your eyes and go within? Where
Yeah.
is your yoga? Where is
Mhm.
the union between your body, mind, and soul, and not comparing, how
Mhm.
much deeper their lotus pose is than yours, or how hot that girl is or that guy is.
Yeah.
It's just the sacred has been very far removed from the things that we know are holy,
Mhm.
and death especially, to watch what's happened. It is big industry, and well, so is religion now.
Oh,
Everything is just, it's all about the money. You go to these big churches and I feel like I'm at Disneyland.
yeah.
The whole thing is just preposterous. And so I feel like the guidance for the people that are caregivers or the people who are losing their loved ones, like I'm half Jewish. And I remember when my grandmother, my Jewish grandmother, came to my graduate school graduation, and I was getting ready, and she looked at me and she said, "Do you really believe that life goes on after we die?" And I said, "Not only do I believe it, Grandmama, I know it." And she said, "Well, if you believe and know it, then I'm going to believe and know it too." Because in the Jewish religion, you don't really believe much happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just think that it's going within. The answers are within. They really
Mm.
are. And that's what I like. Everybody, we seek everything outside of ourselves. And I could give you a whole litany of books that would be great. But I think of a person, you and I having a conversation and me looking at you and realizing, wow, that Tibetan book of living and dying is like, would be perfect for her right now. But
Yeah.
to sit, and then I think it's really important that we go within and kind of just ask our own guides. I personally love Archangel Michael. He's known as like the benevolent angel of death. And he's known to shapeshift as our recognizable loved ones and to help us cross over to, wherever we believe that we're going. And I think just going in and maybe asking, show me, like, I want to see. And Reiki, we did something called, there's an acronym for what we do when we're plugging into that energy, and it's RALA: remember, ask, listen, accept. So if you can remember that you are connected to the divine infinite wisdom, and then you can ask for it, and then you gracefully receive it, and then accept what you've heard. Don't question yourself. Don't think you're nuts because you got some sort of information when you were laying at bed and 2 a.m. and couldn't sleep. That's where the true wisdom is when you're laying in bed and you can't sleep in the middle of the night and you start hearing things and you got to write them in your phone because wow, that's the pure wisdom.
Oh, I love that, Kristy. Oh my gosh, that just spoke to my heart so much. And really what I know to be my truth is, and I think, like you said, with social media, like there's so much information, there's so many authors, there's so many books. I mean, I have two huge bookcases of books that I've looked, read my whole life, trying to fix myself, trying to find that right information. And it's like the whole time, it's always been in here. It's coming home. It's coming into that sacred temple that we have already within us. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't even have to do anything. We are already enough to receive it. It's just we're kind of in a delusion, right? Like you said, everyone wants our money and our attention and it's like that's not it. It's already here. So I love that you said that because you can only truly know when you have that experience for yourself, in your heart
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
truth. I know in my heart what's the truth because we've gone in, we've gotten that evidence, we've gotten those messages, we have that knowing that's out of this world. And oh, I want that for everyone. I want that for every being. Because what would that be like if our world began to go in and how that would
Yeah.
transform everything?
Yeah. Wouldn't that be, and for death and dying, and there's some, I don't even really know how to articulate it yet, but there is some parallel between our sexuality and dying. I think Freud might have talked a little bit about it, and I don't want to read anybody else's stuff. That's the thing, is I'm waiting for this to come to me, because I know that there is, there is something, and I don't know exactly what it is, but the sacredness of our sexuality has been lost. I think we're living through a time where people want to compartmentalize emotional commitment and true intimacy. They're blending the word intimacy with sex, when intimacy, I think, is much more than sex. Intimacy is that ability to deeply connect without anything but a heart connection. And we're compartmentalizing things, and people are behaving as if sex is somehow not spiritual, and it's just some sort of animalistic need that exists within the human. But I believe that there's an element to that there's truth to that. But I think when we know better, we can do better, and we can do different. And we can take what we believe to be a need and turn it into something super sacred and meaningful. And that's the same, again, it's the same with all these things we're talking about, death and dying, our yoga practice, which we put the word yoga to it, but it's the practice of the fundamentals of being a human being, stilling our minds, focusing on the power of our breath, to change our nervous system, to oxygenate every cell in our body, to heal us. And if we can breathe through this life, we can breathe through our sexual relationships, and we can breathe through dying, we're going to be more awake. We're going to have conscious death, conscious sex, conscious life, instead of just, people now, the sexperts you got to schedule sex. You're so busy, you got to schedule it. You got to schedule these conversations. We don't just sit down and make time to go to, like, I love how you texted, I can't wait to, get lost deep in conversation with you. The lost art of conversation, and talking about these things that have so much meaning. Because at the end of the day, like you said, what do people say on their deathbed? A lot of people say, I wish I wouldn't have worked so much. Like, I thought I had to work and just make money, and take care of this and that, instead of connect, instead of just put it all down and stick something in the microwave and sit down and connect. Well, I'm guilty of wanting to, make Thanksgiving dinner every night. And I find that, right? I'm like the one who wants to make them like the most amazing meal every night. And it really does take away from the time of just connecting, because I'm so focused on the food prep and the presentation and all that. Instead of just saying, sometimes we're just going to, throw an organic microwavable lasagna from Sprouts in the microwave and have that, and talk about your day, and look in your eyes, and just really be here for you. So I think we're all guilty of it in certain ways, because it's to go that deep is intense, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with it.
It's really intense. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. We'll just let them run outside. There's a level of vulnerability and a level of discomfort, and I know that, I have some friendships and relationships that we can go deep and vulnerable, but the majority, it's so surface. And to me, it can feel draining, but I also have just developed compassion, because you can't really fix anyone or make them deeper. The only thing you can do is kind of touch that place within yourself and offer that to others. And some people are going to take it and run with it, and other people are just gonna be like, that's too much. But
they're afraid, but it's so refreshing, like, to be able to, when we met, I think it's really neat that we met in the water, because that is such a place for emotional unconscious to rise, and just for us to be vulnerable. And I just really feel like there is a refreshing component to honesty that people do want. They don't know how to do it, but the more that we just bare our souls to each other, the more that we're, very honest about our pain and our suffering, coexisting, because I like to say I'm a broken love dove and a phoenix rising at the same time. I'm super empowered and super wounded. I'm everything at the same time. I can be happy and I can be sad at the same moment. And
Mm.
I think instead of trying to label that and think there's something messed up with that, I think that is the true totality of the human experience, is that we're
Mm.
not, my father really taught me that life is rarely black and white. It is lots of shades of gray, and happiness fleeting. It's moment. Think that, you got to be happy all the time or something's wrong. You wouldn't even know the happiness without the sadness.
Oh, I know. So it's so
Right?
true. Yeah, I mean, we really do come for that. I believe our souls come for that dichotomy to really understand the truth of who we are. We could never understand what a smile is if everyone was smiling all the time.
That's right. That's so right.
Right.
We have to have the frown to know it.
Yeah. And it's easy to forget. It's easy to get swept up because our culture so much is like, be happy, be positive. Don't hide what's the truth. And I think, and that's oppressive. And that I think that's why so many of us are anxious and depressed, because we haven't been able to share our heart, to share our suffering. I know you're coming, I do these women's circles, and if anyone's been in a women's circle, it's we've been doing this since the dawn of time, where women come together and share our human experience, our heart. And when someone gets vulnerable, and we hold them, and then it inspires someone else to be vulnerable, I feel that transmutation of all of us saying, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. I'm not
Yes.
alone in this. And I feel this like release and relief after, where these women are like, oh, it just feels so good to remember I'm not alone, and to not feel alone, and to know, when someone else suffers in the same way, it actually kind of makes your suffering a little less sufferable, you know?
Exactly. Yes. I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And that it brings up a lot, because so many times people put on different masks,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when they're dealing with end of life things, or they just completely retreat and
Yeah.
they disconnect from allowing others in, because they feel like, I don't want to burden somebody with my sadness, or I don't. But that's what's real. I remember when my dad passed, some of their best friends came over, and the husband went downstairs to see my dad, and the wife was like, I can't see him that way. She couldn't even get out of her own way to go say goodbye to him because of her fear or
Yeah.
discomfort around it. And I think it's because in so many families, we try to protect children. Like, oh, I don't want little Johnny to go to the funeral. I don't want little Johnny to see that. But I think what's so important is that little Johnny does see that and
Yeah.
understands the impermanence of life, because then I think when the earlier we realize that life is impermanent and it's a gift, the sooner we can change the way we live. We can have a
Yes.
more intentional life, a more purposeful life, a more gracious life, a
Mm.
more appreciative life, where we really value every moment that we have. But it's
Mm.
interesting because you see people that have lost family members or lost, you know, children, and they're still running around angry and pissed off and just in the rat race, because they could, how many people don't even deal with their grief.
Yeah.
They run from it. They just move on from, get divorced, go right into another relationship,
Yeah.
don't allow themselves to grieve,
Yeah.
a long-term relationship, or lose a loved one and get up and go to work, and don't allow them. And, a lot of corporate work settings, what, they give you 72 hours to grieve. I can remember people coming in and saying, well, I went to the lake, I went to the butte for 2 days, I'm done grieving my son. Wow. Show me how that's done.
I don't
I mean,
know.
I remember when I got divorced, and I said to one of my dear friends, well, I've been pre-grieving a lot, so I think I'll be done in like 3 months. I wanted to be done in 3 months.
Yeah.
No, what I realize is that you're never done,
Yeah.
because the illusion of time being linear is an illusion, because the past and the present and the future coexist. And
Mm.
if we allow ourselves for one moment to think back to the past, we can become sad, and if we go into the future, we become anxious. And
Yeah.
the job is to try to stay in the now, knowing that they all swirl around at the same time. It's so fascinating.
It's so
It,
fascinating, and I can see how, like, our mind just cannot comprehend that. But it's like somewhere in my heart, it's like it brings comfort,
yeah.
that in a way this is an illusion, and that everything is moving and changing, and that's the only true truth, really, is that change is
Yeah.
we change. That's the only impermanence is. And I think it's so interesting. We grasp and try to keep things the same way, and we attach, and instead of just allowing it to flow, allowing it to move, and allowing and just detaching, just like, Buddhism. I mean, I love studying Buddhism because a lot of how they see on life and how mindfulness and how they teach that it's, to really understand that everything's impermanent. We
Yeah.
can truly embrace the moment because it's never going to be this way again.
Yeah.
Just like my Monday yoga class, we come in and it's there. It's like, well, this class will never be again. Even though you
Yeah.
come every Monday, it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's always going to be different. For me, that's because, people kind of think, oh, here, and we have this repetitive, we have these like things that we do on that makes us feel like Groundhog Day when really nothing is ever the same.
Yeah. That's so true. That's the only thing that is constant is
Mm.
change. And I
Yeah.
think that's what's so hard for people is we get, but people, I'm a creature of habit. I can't handle that change, but we're changing and everything is changing. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about life is we really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or who we're going to meet or, I never would have known that I was going to meet you and just
Oh,
going to that circle,
yeah.
created this opportunity for us to reconnect in this form. And
Yeah.
life is really beautiful, but there are going to be heartbreaks in life, and it's just part of it. But if we really realize that it's all an illusion, we really need to be so broken. I
Mm.
don't know. I'm really just exploring all of these
Yeah.
concepts and things we've agreed to. Beyond, I love that book, The Five Agreements, but I think there are or the Four Agreements.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a fifth one now. Is there a fifth one now, though? I
There's a
think there
fifth
might
one,
be
yes.
one. I love that book, but I feel like there's even more new agreements that we
Yeah.
can make and more
Yes.
things that can be let go of that don't serve us anymore. I'm fascinated by all the new terms and psychology, and there's just so much new information out there.
Yeah.
And I just really look forward to how we can help each other to embrace change in life instead of
Mm.
thinking of it as I don't even that word death, it's just got such a connotation to it. It's
Yeah.
like it's a transition. It's really
Transition.
what's
Yeah.
right. We're this is ending and something with every ending is a new beginning. When one door
Yeah.
closes, a new one opens. And it's the same for the soul. I love talking about that differentiality. Let's do that about the
That's,
differentiality between soul and spirit.
I love that. Yes.
So what's your understanding of it? Like, how would you language that?
Well, let's see, just coming from my current understanding, for me, a soul would be almost like an individuation of spirit. So it's almost like we're a drop of water and spirit, that's the soul, and spirit is like the ocean.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Okay, what about you? What's yours?
Wow. Well, I think you just said it so beautifully. I want to adopt that. I
Yeah,
love
please.
how you said that. I have come to sort of language it as the soul is like you and me. Becky is the soul, Kristy is the soul, and the spirit is the eternal, kind of like that cellular soup, if you will. So the
Mm,
same kind of concept, but I love that because I just have a very special connection with water and we are so much water. And so I
yes.
feel like what you just said really is a beautiful metaphor or analogy for the difference between spirit and soul. I love that.
Thank you. I would love to expand it because I have a vision that's present now. It's like we come from the ocean and then maybe our journey is we evaporate into the clouds and then the clouds take us far away and we go into the mountain and now we go down the mountain and this is our lives on earth and we experience and we go through the rocks and we go into the darkness of the earth and then maybe we are bubbled out into like a hot spring by a volcano and then we meander in through the rivers with the birds and maybe a bird eats us, maybe a human eats us and pees us out and then eventually we end up back in the ocean.
I love it. I love it. We
But
all
just
come from the water.
Yeah, but just like that idea that we could never really know the ocean, ourselves as part of the ocean, unless we traveled away, unless we were able to know what it's like to be separate when we really hold the whole ocean within us, the whole blueprint of the ocean. And I think the more that we can explore that, like you said, the more that we can explore that we are not separate. Like the energy that looks through your eyes is the same that looks through mine and my dogs and all the animals and the insects and all the beings. Like we're all made of the same material.
Yeah.
And but our world really does divide us, and I think that's what's the true illusion is that's where and I feel this, you feel this way, is we're really coming out of that separation. You're red, you're blue, you're wrong, you're right. And some of us, not all, are coming into that knowing like we're all the same,
Yeah.
you know.
We're all one. And
We're all
all of
one.
this stuff is just distracting us from our oneness.
Yes, yes. And the only way we can really connect with that is to go, like you said earlier, to go in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's something that's so interesting about life in general. I think people are always seeking the wisdom outside of themselves, whether they go to a place to worship and think that someone's going to say something that they don't already know,
yeah,
or they, I mean, we know how many gurus have taken advantage of their devotees.
yes.
And it's at the end of the day, the most important thing we can do for other people is to remind them that the wisdom is within and to teach them how to listen to their intuition. I used
Mm,
to lead firewalks. My ex and I were certified in leading firewalks. And one of the biggest things you do is to teach people how to check in, listen to their own intuition about should you walk across the fire?
mm,
Are you doing this because everybody else is doing it? Are you doing it because you think you have to? Because you don't. You can still receive the same gifts from the fire, from Kali, as if you didn't walk, just by being present, by being around
mm.
that fire and being in that energy. And we can't do it for other people. We have to learn how to listen to our own intuition, and the fire becomes a metaphor for life.
Mm.
It's learning, should I do that? Do I need to do that? Is
Yes.
that really necessary for me? And
Mm.
we don't have to do things that we don't want to do. And that's like with everything in life. But I think we're so conditioned and
Yeah.
taught that, you have to do A, B, C, and D to be successful or to be
Oh,
happy or to be whole.
yes.
And we
Mm.
got to go within and define like what is, if people didn't have, well, this is a great story. And this is something we used to talk about in the firewalk. So it's all about thinking outside of the box and making new agreements. So imagine there's a little baby laying in a crib and the sun's coming in just right, creating that beautiful, etheric, heavenly, beam. And you see the dust particles, and the mom walks in and sees her precious little baby goo goo and gagaing and looks down, and there's a big spider. And the baby is looking at the spider, goo gaga, all happy. And the mom screams, ah, because she's afraid that the spider's going to hurt her baby. So now her baby has a negative association to spiders. The
Mm-hmm.
baby didn't have any fear. The baby didn't know the spider was scary until mom screamed. And
Mm.
so, because the baby didn't know the spider was scary, the spider wasn't going to hurt the baby. But now the fear energy is there, and now the threat energy is there. And it's the same thing with the fire. We agree that the fire is going to burn us, but when we can get our energy as hot as the fire and we become one with that fire, it can't burn us because we are the fire.
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
how you firewalk, is you get your energy so hot and so high. And you have everybody has like a mantra that they say. My mantra is always, I am one with God. I am one with all of creation. I am one with the fire. I am one with the fire. And you don't even have to walk if you don't get that, that you don't feel like you need to. You don't have to. But I think so much of life is about making new agreements. How am I going to experience this? Not what the textbooks tell me, not what the preacher tells me, or the rabbi, or the whomever, or the author, or the
Mm-hmm.
celebrity. It's, what do I think? What do I feel? How do I cancel out? And that to me is, I coined this term called awaken. It's like awaken with an O. And it's come full circle back to your own inner vision, your own inner wisdom.
Mm.
What should I eat? Not a diet that somebody else says works. How do I listen to myself?
Yeah.
Oh, for your whole life, you're told you have to eat breakfast or something's wrong with you. Well, my whole life, I never wanted breakfast.
I
I
know.
want breakfast for dinner, but I don't want it when I wake up in the morning. Like, the
Right.
last thing I want is I don't even want a toothbrush in my mouth. Like, I
Yeah.
just want, I don't want anything. And we're taught these ways that we're supposed to be. And all the experts say that this is this and that is that. And then it's very confusing
Mm-hmm.
for us to listen to our own intuition.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I don't
That's
know what
okay.
happened.
That's
Okay.
okay. And see you. Wow. I love that. I feel like this is the perfect place to kind of bring it all together because, I mean, if there's any one message that the listener, I hope, walks away with is that, like, question what we're saying. Don't even, I mean, really,
Oh, I
you
love
have
that.
all the
Yeah.
answers, and you can't make money that way. That's the thing is like you have all the answers, you have everything you need, doesn't sell anything. But when we really understand that we don't have to keep searching. And so my prayer, my wish is that whoever listens to this, and if you're listening, you were destined to listen to this from the beginning of time, feels that message. And Kristy, I just love you. I'm just so grateful for our sisterhood, for our friendship, and for spirit bringing us water molecules together to share.
Too. I love you too. We're like the waterfall.
I
And
know we
and
are.
I'm grateful that you had me today. I look forward to just doing more wonderful things with you and helping other people to remember that all the answers are within.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, hold on here because we're going to chit chat after. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. I know Kristy has a website coming, so I'm going to actually put her contact information and her website. If you just want to connect with her, if you have questions, you just feel a call to reach out. I know Kristy would be super happy to connect with you. So,
Thanks so much.
all right, everyone. We'll catch you on the next Hippie Moms podcast. Bye.